My name is Frida. This started on Thanksgiving, the day my mother-in-law paraded my husband's mistress in front of everyone. But the real story began months earlier when my grandfather William, my anchor since childhood, passed away after a long fight with illness. He raised me after my parents died. He was my family, my teacher, the one who walked me down the aisle when I married Jacob 6 years ago. When doctors said he had only a few months left, I spent nearly every waking moment with him. Jacob seemed supportive, comforting me at the hospital and telling me I was strong. Only later did I realize I missed obvious signs. Jacob's sudden interest in my grandfather's finances, his casual comments about the estate, his late nights at his father's firm, they all blend together now. At the time, I was drowning in grief and assumed the emotional distance between us was because I was falling apart. 2 weeks ago, while organizing my grandfather's study for the estate process, I found documents that made my stomach drop. Jacob had contacted the wealth manager repeatedly before my grandfather even passed, asking about asset distribution and transfer timelines. It felt like ice water down my back. Then I checked our shared laptop. Emails between Jacob and a woman named Vanessa talked about waiting until the estate was finalized. I dug further. Phone records, messages from my mother-in-law, Patricia, telling him I was too deep in grief to notice, and calling Vanessa perfect, educated, well-connected. I stared at the screen through tears. While I sat beside my grandfather as he took his last breath, they were preparing to replace me. Grief and betrayal hit all at once. But I remembered something my grandfather told me during one of his last clear moments. Grief makes you vulnerable, and predators strike when you're unsteady. He warned me never to make big decisions while mourning. So I closed the laptop and breathed. I wouldn't confront Jacob while broken. I would think several moves ahead, exactly as my grandfather taught me. The next day, I hired a private investigator named Pete. 4 days later, Pete sent his first encrypted report. Jacob had been seeing Vanessa Cole for 4 months, starting a month before my grandfather died. Photos showed intimate dinners, hotel meetings, his hand on her back as they walked into places I'd never even heard of. The timestamps were the worst part. He was out with her on the night I begged him to come to the hospital because I couldn't handle watching my grandfather suffer alone. He claimed he had an urgent client meeting. Pete's report added more. Vanessa was 27, from a wealthy family, working in wealth management. And Patricia had introduced them at a charity event I skipped because my grandfather was having a terrible day. Photos showed Patricia smiling approvingly at multiple outings, actively supporting their affair while I mourned. The worst part were the photos from the dinner parties Patricia hosted, so-called family gatherings. While I was supposed to be too grief-stricken to socialize, Vanessa played her part perfectly, laughing with Jacob's father, chatting with his sister, stepping into my life as if it were hers. I stared at the images for hours, feeling something cold replace the grief. Then I called Felicia Granite, the estate attorney my grandfather had trusted in his final weeks. Her voice was warm but professional, asking if I was ready to review the trust. I told her yes, but I needed to understand how protected the inheritance really was. Felicia invited me to her office downtown, sleek and glassy. She laid out the documents with precision. "Your grandfather was strategic," she said. "The estate totaled $8.5 million. Properties, investments, businesses, and a family trust spanning 3 generations. It was all mine." Then she revealed the threat. About 6 weeks before he died, someone tried to get him to sign a postnup giving Jacob 40% of my inheritance. Jacob pushed for it during hospital visits, claiming it was to help me manage the estate. My blood ran cold. Felicia smiled grimly. My grandfather fired that lawyer and called her instead. He spent his last lucid weeks restructuring everything to protect me. The trust made the inheritance irrevocable and me the sole beneficiary. There was a clause for divorce due to infidelity. If that happened within 2 years, Jacob would get nothing, and any funds already received must be returned. Every document reflected my grandfather's love and foresight. He suspected Jacob's intentions. He'd seen him calculating something on his phone at the hospital. That's why he added these extra protections, to guard me while I grieved and to ensure nobody could exploit my vulnerability. I left Felicia's office with copies of the estate documents and a renewed sense of purpose. That night, while Jacob assumed I was too depressed to manage finances, I began recording everything. Every conversation, every push to settle quickly, every secret meeting he'd arranged with lawyers. I screenshotted texts between Jacob and Vanessa, discussions about inheritance timelines, amounts, and future plans. His lies went beyond the affair, pretending to attend counseling, claiming late office nights, even charging dinners to our joint account. He'd taken $15,000 from savings after my grandfather's funeral for a weekend getaway with Vanessa. I opened personal accounts, redirected estate funds into protected trusts, and documented every penny he spent while pretending to support his grieving wife. Then Patricia called. sweet and saccharine, inviting me to Thanksgiving. She mentioned Vanessa, using my grandfather's kindness to justify cruelty. I feigned agreement, keeping my voice small and tired. I sat silently after hanging up, realizing she expected me to watch my husband's mistress play house. But instead of cornering me, she had created the perfect stage. Over the next week, I prepared. I visited grandfather's grave, told him everything, and felt his presence guiding me. 3 moves ahead, just like you taught me, I whispered. I chose my outfit carefully. Black morning dress, grandfather's vintage watch, grandmother's pearl necklace, visible symbols of the inheritance they wanted to steal. I called my sister and best friend, warning them to intervene if needed. The night before Thanksgiving, I memorized key clauses in the estate and practiced staying calm in the mirror. Thanksgiving morning arrived cold and clear. Jacob performed his usual act. Coffee in bed, forehead kiss, praising my strength. I wondered if he even believed his own lies. We arrived at Patricia's house on schedule, ready for the confrontation I had meticulously prepared. The house looked perfect, as if we weren't mourning at all. Elaborate fall decorations, gleaming china, enough food for 30, though only 12 were coming. Patricia greeted us in a designer dress, her concern fake and sharp. "Frida, sweetheart, are you eating?" she asked, her voice dripping with false care. The living room was full of familiar faces. Richard uncomfortable in his chair, Jennifer and Tom offering sympathetic smiles, Uncle Frank radiating anger, and Diane giving me a subtle nod of support. At the place of honor next to Patricia sat Vanessa Cole, the polished, wealthy, oblivious weapon I had seen only in surveillance photos. When Vanessa saw Jacob, her expression shifted to carefully practiced sympathy. Patricia introduced them like it was their first meeting. The handshake, the smile, the slight tilt of his head. It all played out perfectly. Vanessa, friendly and open, mentioned moving here for work, praising Patricia for telling her about the family. I stayed quiet, letting them believe I was fragile and unaware. Dinner began at 6, Patricia controlling seating like a strategist. Jacob sat across from Vanessa, I at the far end, between Uncle Frank and Diane, who squeezed my hand under the table in support. Conversation was mundane, golf, kids, holidays, but Patricia kept highlighting Vanessa's credentials. Vanessa has an MBA from a top school and works in wealth management, Patricia announced. I caught the implication. She had the perfect skills to handle my inheritance. I spoke softly, meeting Vanessa's eyes. Estate management can be delicate, especially when people are vulnerable. Vanessa smiled sympathetically. It really is. Trust is everything in my field. Clients need advisors with no hidden agenda. The irony was exquisite. Patricia pushed further. Vanessa came from a wealthy family, her father in finance, giving her advice about managing clients during transitions. I murmured politely, how thoughtful. My grandfather was careful about whom he trusted with money, especially near the end. He often said, that's when you see people's true colors. Jacob shifted nervously, and Patricia's smile tightened. During the main course, Vanessa unknowingly described her own situation, talking about honesty, hidden agendas, and the dangers of deception. I watched Jacob go rigid while Patricia tried to redirect. Uncle Frank, fueled by wine and outrage, finally spoke. You know what this reminds me of? He said. He told a story my grandfather shared before dying, how he feared vultures circling me, protecting me from those who marry for inheritance. He even fired a lawyer Jacob had brought to pressure him at the hospital. The room went silent, ice settling in glasses. I raised mine in a quiet toast to grandfather's wisdom. Patricia was panicking but committed to her plan. Dessert arrived. Pumpkin pie, my grandfather's favorite. Patricia stood with her wine, speaking loudly about how marriages change after loss and why Vanessa was ideal for Jacob. Jennifer gasped. Richard looked shocked, and Uncle Frank's face purple with rage. I stayed calm, set down my fork, and spoke with ice-cold clarity. Speaking of things we should know, I began, let's discuss the estate documents. Patricia's triumphant smile faltered. I continued like presenting a business case. Grandfather left me $8.5 million in properties, investments, and a family trust. In his final weeks, he restructured everything, making sure Jacob could not access it. I pulled out the folder of certified copies from Felicia Granite, grandfather's attorney after he fired the one Jacob hired. Shall we review the protection clauses together? The room was silent. I revealed the truth. Jacob had been having an affair with Vanessa for 4 months, starting before grandfather's death and continuing through the funeral. Vanessa's face drained of color. Patricia had orchestrated it, believing I wouldn't notice once the inheritance was settled. I turned to Vanessa directly. Did Jacob tell you we were separated? That I was too consumed by grief to be a real wife? That he slept in the guest room? Vanessa's face answered everything. We were together 3 nights ago. He lied to both of us. I pulled out the surveillance photos Pete had taken. Dinners, hotels, a weekend trip Jacob took with my money a week after grandfather's funeral, claiming it was for estate attorney fees. Jacob tried to stand, but I held up my hand. "Let's talk about money," I said. Grandfather's estate documents were specific. The inheritance is in an irrevocable trust, not marital property. And the vulture clause meant that if I divorced due to adultery within 2 years, Jacob got nothing and must return any estate-related funds. I listed his financial infidelities, $23,000 over 4 months. I turned to Patricia. The postnuptial agreement she and Jacob tried to force on grandfather was blocked. Grandfather anticipated it and added protections. I showed the letter he'd left. "If you're reading this, someone tried to take advantage of you. I'm proud of you. Love, Grandpa William." "I'll file divorce papers Monday. Jacob keeps nothing from the inheritance, only $8,000 pre-inheritance savings. Everything else, including the house, is mine," I stated calmly. I looked at Vanessa gently. "I don't entirely blame you, but ask yourself why Patricia pushed this and Jacob went along." I turned to Patricia. "You used my grief as an opportunity. You tried to steal my inheritance while I mourned." I looked at Jacob. "You held my hand at the funeral while planning this betrayal." Uncle Frank raised his glass. "To William, better judge of character than any of us." I thanked those who had supported me and walked toward the door. Vanessa called after me, pale but sincere. I had no idea he was lying about everything. I nodded. "I believe you, but ask why Patricia was so eager and Jacob so willing to let her." I stepped into the cold November night. The next morning, my phone rang, Vanessa's voice shaking. I confronted Jacob. He admitted everything. Then Patricia called me. What did she say? Vanessa admitted what Patricia had told her. I ruined everything by being emotional. Too weak, never able to find someone like Jacob. She laughed through tears. I realized she didn't care about anyone's feelings. Just control. Just the money. "Exactly," I said. "And she was going to use both of us." Vanessa confessed she planned to invest in Jacob's ventures once the inheritance came through, funding her own schemes. We spoke for 20 minutes, sharing how Patricia had manipulated us. The divorce went exactly as Felicia predicted. Jacob didn't contest. The estate remained mine, house included. He borrowed from his parents to repay the $23,000, finalized in 90 days. 6 weeks later, I ran into Jennifer at grandfather's coffee shop. She hugged me. I had no idea. Jacob's miserable, finally realizing what he lost. Patricia's been spinning stories, but no one believes her, especially after Vanessa explained everything before leaving town. Uncle Frank had told the extended family the truth at Christmas. Richard and his wife started intensive marriage counseling. 4 months later, Jacob showed up at my door. Older, thin, exhausted. "I don't deserve to be here, but I need you to know something," he said. He admitted he'd been manipulated, used my grief, and realized he had lost the best thing in his life. I nodded. "Thank you for saying that." He paused, then added, "You were magnificent that night. I've never seen anyone handle themselves with such strength." After he left, I reflected on forgiveness, closure, and life's strange ways. 1 year later, I was dating a wonderful man named James, finally able to move forward, stronger and wiser from everything I had endured. James, an estate planning attorney I'd met at a foundation event, understood grief in a way few could. We stood at grandfather's grave on the anniversary of his death. I brought flowers, as always. "I wish I could have met him," James said quietly. "He would have liked you. Your honesty, that mattered more than anything." I told grandfather about the foundation I'd started with part of the inheritance, teaching financial literacy and protecting vulnerable people from predatory family members. I shared how James and the protections grandfather set up had kept me safe. Everyone thought grief would weaken me. I whispered to the headstone, "You knew it would make me stronger. Thank you for protecting me even after you were gone." James asked if I regretted the public confrontation with Patricia. "No," I said. Her cruelty used my grief as cover, and public exposure was the perfect response. Updates I'd heard comforted me. Vanessa thriving, Jacob teaching financial literacy, Patricia and Richard separated. Grief doesn't make you weak. I said more to myself than anyone else. It reveals people, who they really are, including you. Grandfather knew that. His final gift wasn't just the inheritance. It was showing I could protect it, and myself. James took my hand. "To William's wisdom," he said softly. "To the people who love us enough to protect us, even when they're gone," I replied. Walking back to the car, I felt grandfather's presence as always. Not gone, just different. Still guiding and protecting. Some think the best revenge is getting even. I learned something better. The best revenge is surviving, thriving, and honoring those who truly loved you.